Welcome to Anthodish, the show about food, culture, and identity. I'm your host, Sarah Dugnan. Here in Ontario, we're just hitting the warmer spring weather after a very grey and cloudy winter, and anyone living up north can attest to the amount of daydreaming that we can do about our future and past summer plans. During that daydreaming, memory and nostalgia can play a significant role in establishing what makes for an ideal summer, with taste, sense, and flavor playing powerful roles in thinking about what foods we need to prepare and share with our families and communities. During the summer, the simple and the mouth-watering foods tend to satisfy a bit better than during a blustery winter snowstorm. But how can one capture the ritual and ceremony of joy and make it last throughout the year? My guest today is Katie Laliberté, who's here to share the nostalgic and delicious experiences that informed the forthcoming Heydays at the June Motel, Beachtown Classics Cookbook, which is co-authored by Freddy Laliberte, Evan Bulch, and Emma Bulch. Katie helped to open Heydays Restaurant in Sauble Beach in 2020 after many years of supporting restaurants in Toronto. She is a writer and sometimes bookseller and is currently working on a restaurant romance novel as well. Today, Katie explores the pandemic landscape origins of Heydays Restaurant through its ongoing partnership with the June Motel, how her Connecticut roots inform the unique coastal comfort food cuisine within the cookbook, and how the restaurant and book serve as an invitation to take the beach home with you and create summer memories to last a lifetime. Here's my conversation with Katie. Welcome to the show, Katie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Doing well. I'm so excited to have you here because this is one of the special types of interviews where I get to interview a longtime friend on some cool work that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm very excited, and we'll try to keep it on topic.
As best we can.
Uh-huh.
Do you mind sharing for the audience a bit of background about who you are, where you're coming in from today, and a snapshot of the type of work that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So, we're here to talk about the Heydays Cookbook, which I wrote, and I was a founding opener of the Heydays Restaurant in Sauble Beach, located at the June Motel. But my partner, Freddie, and I, we have a long history opening restaurants in Toronto before this, and then a couple others as well. But that's kind of my side hustle. Actually, I work in tech in the day-to-day. So I'm a little bit all over the place, but writing and restaurants really are a passion, which is pretty cool. And I get to do some fun things with them.
Yeah, it's fantastic too that you mentioned that balance of like side hustle and full-time job, because I feel like that's something that we all kind of do and then don't necessarily talk about it as openly. So
Yeah. It's and they're both big things. Like it's I love my job in tech as well. So it's finding that balance.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's always a through line with your work where there's like the writing is always center to what you're doing, and you can really feel like that heart-centered approach to your writing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about specifically around Heydays, because this is such a unique sort of cultural concept in Ontario where, even within the name, you're looking at this idea of nostalgia. How would you describe Heydays Restaurant to someone who hasn't heard about it or hasn't seen it yet?
Heydays is an enclave. What I really love about it is you get to Sauble Beach and you have a main street where, there's a lot happening that goes straight down to the beach. The motel is actually a little bit off the beaten path, just slightly. And Heydays patio is behind. So you go there and you have this like beautiful oasis that you could be anywhere in the world. And, I just think it's this, like, it feels like summer. It feels like vacation. The team at the June Motel was so good at creating a vibe. And then I think coupling that with our operational expertise, you have, beautiful plates and beautiful cocktails being brought out to your table as you're sitting poolside, which is just, it's a vacation experience at the end of the day. And it's a celebration. Like it is just really like, these are the good old days. And you feel that the second you walk onto the patio. So I don't know, that it's a little bit like cheesy to say that was the tagline that we came up with. Someday these will be the good old days. But I think it's really important to note that we came up with that in the middle of a pandemic, which was a really weird time. And kind of made us laugh every time we said it out loud. And yet at the same time, we got to create something with friends and with people we love, and get to meet a new community. And so it was a weird time, but it really was an incredible time to open a restaurant, actually.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really unique bubble of time too, especially thinking about the particular restrictions that were going on in Ontario during that time
Mm-hmm.
with dining out, with being able to gather with certain groups of people, certain limitations on how many people could sit together. So how did that sort of, early pandemic structure, did it influence how Heydays started out in terms of how it, was structured or serviced?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we started talking to, I'll back up and just say, like, this is a collaboration between two teams, really, between the June Motel team and our restaurant team. So myself, my husband, and his good friend Evan, and Evan's wife Emma. Um, and we, in 2019, we started talking about this. And if you cast your mind back to 2019, nobody had any idea what was coming. So we had plans, and we were talking about a more casual restaurant even back then. Freddie really liked the idea of a counter service model, because, staffing a seasonal business can be really hard. He wanted to keep it casual. That contrasted a bit with what the June Motel team wanted. They saw more of like a sit-down restaurant. But then all of a sudden, pandemic comes along. The renovations were very behind. So it was clear we weren't going to open for the summer of 2020 in like the way we envisioned. But we had a parking lot, and we had picnic tables, and we had a functioning kitchen. So we started Heydays as a pop-up because the rules were more flexible. Like, when you were outside of cities during like the early part of the pandemic, there were a little bit more, I would say, you could do a little more with outdoor
Yeah.
dining and sort of takeout concepts. And that let us, have very spaced out tables that we set up in a parking lot. And people would come up to me in my face shield and would order at the door, and then we'd bring out their food. And it was a way to sort of test the concept and prove the concept before we, got started in a full way. I think it was such a hard time for restaurants who had been operating for a really long time and had to pivot their whole models and
Mm.
figure out how to support staff and how to keep, rent paid and all of these other things. And by contrast, we were really lucky that we were starting out fresh and could just kind of make it up as we went along. And the customers in this area were just so eager to have, something like this, that that they went along with it. And that was pretty liberating. It was for everybody, a very mixed time, but I think it was an interesting time for this concept to be born.
Yeah, it's interesting too because as you're describing this, I had forgotten like the relief I felt when I got out of Toronto during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just the ability, like I moved back to like my hometown during that time period,
Mm,
and it just didn't feel as densely crowded, and you could eat
yeah.
outdoors and you didn't feel that stress. So it's nice to hear that that was what was happening as you were kind of trying to pivot within the pandemic to figure out how you're going to launch Heydays too.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, I think things, to your point, more spaced out, fewer people, a lot more outdoor space to utilize. And that's felt very lucky to have that, and that we had sort of put that in motion prior. Because, it was very much a privilege to go through that time like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious, like thinking about the idea of Sauble Beach, because again, it's this kind of gemstone in Ontario of culture that we don't always necessarily immediately think of. But how would you describe the cultural landscape there, particularly, as you're walking into the idea of this business, even pre-pandemic, in terms of the location of Heydays and the motel, was there meaning to that area prior to you taking on Heydays and the June Motel coming into business as
Mm.
well?
Yeah, so for our partner Evan, he had been coming up to Sauble Beach for years and years and years, like as a kid. So he was very familiar. For Freddie and I, we'd actually never been, and the first two times we arrived were during snowstorms. So we had no idea like what this place looked like in the summer. But yeah, even in the middle of a pandemic, when things were definitely very different, you know, how stores opened and things like that, it was such a beautiful beach, and it was busy, and you know, people were just sort of filling the main street. And you know, like because it was like you could go to a beach and you could be outside, and the swimming is incredible. It's a long white sand beach that's absolutely beautiful. So very quickly we were like, this place is incredible. It was also incredible how well accepted we were. We were not expecting that. We were kind of like, oh gosh, here we are, interlopers from outside. Um, but I think, you know, there's a lot of room for more sort of businesses and more things to do in Sauble Beach. Like, it's compared to some other sort of Bruce Peninsula towns, I'd say it's still sort of developing, or it's been kept quite small in a lot of ways. Just, you know, due to infrastructure and things like that in the town. But those things have actually made it really charming and adorable. And it's just very exciting to be part of like the businesses that are contributing to the landscape here. There were, we'll say, like 4 places to get burgers and 4 places to get pizza, but not many other restaurants at the time when we rolled in. So I think that really helped get people excited for like, hey, there's something a little different here that we can jump on the bandwagon for.
And it's a really fun concept. And I think particularly when you think of the idea of like an Ontario beach town versus, you know, an LA beach town, you don't necessarily think of the same sorts of easygoing dynamics because of, you know, the Great Lakes and like how big and foreboding they can be as well. So I think, you know, the kind of effortless aesthetic that Heydays has I can see that there's so much thought into creating a space that's like very fun and nostalgic as well.
Yeah, and that I credit the June Motel team, Sarah and April. They are very, very good at that piece of it. This has been such an incredible collaboration because we have all the experience running restaurants, and we didn't have to focus on that side of it. And it's something that they do so well. And, you know, they're very good at Instagram. They're very good at aesthetic, but there's a lot that sort of like holds it up as well. I think you feel really good in the space. It's not just, you know, it's not just that it looks good. It's that like when you're there, you're like, oh, okay, the vibe is permeated.
Yeah.
It's for real.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction, especially, you know, especially coming through Toronto in the Instagram age in the 2010s. You know, there's a very different feeling to a place that's made for a picture versus an experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they're really focused on that. So they actually, the way it works is Heydays will stay with the June Motel, that brand, you know, forever and ever. They developed the brand to go with the June Motel concept. And so but they did that with a lot of, you know, consultation with us and a lot of collaboration as we sort of built out, you know, what it looked like. And, you know, they told us in the early days, like, we feel like we are sort of the shepherds or what is it? We're holding this very special time for our guests, and they're choosing to spend that special time away with loved ones in our space. And we take that responsibility very seriously. And I think that's something that informs then how we operate a restaurant as well. Like, you know, you are joining us with your loved ones, and, you know, throw that into the contrast of like a time when you couldn't see everybody that you wanted to see.
Yeah.
We take it really, really seriously. We try to make that time, you know, a celebration and a vacation and, you know, all of those things all at once.
Oh, I love that. And that's really special, I think, to have, you know, restaurant and motel owners thinking through those pieces. One part that really stands out within the restaurant itself is the kind of coastal cuisine that you're serving. And again, thinking in an Ontario construct versus more bi-coastal dynamics of cuisine. I'm curious, what were some of the inspirations in terms of creating this idea of coastal cuisine in Sauble Beach for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because oysters are not known to come from Lake Huron. I don't know if you knew
Yeah.
that. Totally fair question. So Freddie, Evan, and I actually all worked at a beach club, a very fancy beach club in New England many years ago, and I'm from Connecticut originally, so we definitely had this association with summer and with vacation as like that lobster shack that you rock up to. You're still barefoot. It's, got wooden planking, and you order at the counter, and you can leave a weird name to make them call over the speaker, like Mercutio. And like then you just get this tray of lobster dripping in drawn butter and clam strips, and a massive fountain soda. And so that was, I think that was the experience that inspired a lot of this menu, was like what feels like summer, and what can you not get in Sauble Beach. Like you can get a lot of burgers, for example, which we did put on the menu, but you couldn't at the time get oysters. And I think, in this world where the food chain supply is, permits it, we get really good oysters, and we go through a lot of them, and people are really happy to see them brought up to Sauble Beach, even if they're not from there. So we just kind of, it really fit the vibe of what April and Sarah were interested in. Like, lobster rolls and rosé, we sort of had them locked down at that point. And then as well, we sort of expanded to other things, like what feels like summer, what feels like vacation and fun. So that's when we pulled in as well, local stuff. So we do a lot of local trout. We have a really nice crispy skin trout on the menu, and smoked trout on our share plate. And then as well, sort of delved into a little bit more like the comfort food aspect that, really fills our background in a big way.
Yeah, and that's something like when I think of the food that you and Freddie and your teams created in Toronto and beyond, you've got like poutinis, Bobby Sue's mac and cheese, Hawker Bar. Like you are just like the best experts in creating comfort food that is so delicious and like such a joyful experience. So how did what sorts of factors did you find important to transfer that background experience of comfort food into the menu that you're serving at Heydays?
Yeah, it's a little counterintuitive, but Bobby Sue's mac and cheese was actually really popular in the summertime, which I never expected, because it can be fairly heavy. But I think there's something about like barbecue, and I don't know, it almost does better in that weather, and it's one of the most popular things at Heydays too, like our mac and cheese and the lobster mac and cheese that we do. So yeah, we just kind of thought like, okay, what feels good to sit down and eat, and we actually tried to boot the mac and cheese off the menu because it was really hard to execute and too popular. Fried chicken, our Old Bay fried chicken, is one of the most popular items, and I think Freddie and Evan too are just really good at sort of engineering or tinkering until it's the best version of, a mac and cheese or of a fried chicken that you've like ever had. And Freddie gets very scientific about it to like exact percentages of rice flour to regular flour, until like, it really is just an incredible product that goes out the door. And then his other, I think, superpower is ensuring that quality is consistent, and that you're always getting the same thing. And we have guests coming back year after year who are, saying like, wow, it's, I keep waiting to be disappointed, and it just lives up to it. So I think it's, with those, and that was always the theme of poutinis, is like simple or classic done right. And I think that's the focus. And so we kind of brought that forward to Heydays, where it's not a huge menu, but anything that's on there is like a heavy hitter and does a lot of work. And I don't cook, so I can say this without without shame. But like, I've been told by so many people, "Wow, this is the best version of this thing that I've had,"
Yeah.
and that's really fun and exciting, and that's what we want, the experience to be when you're spending hard-earned money, you're taking some time away, you want a great experience, and yeah, I think that's kind of that part was really cool to do.
That's awesome. And yeah, I think like when I think of the food that I've had at your restaurants, it almost creates like an archetype of what I expect afterward.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like the burgers or the fries, there's just the amount of detail that, Freddie puts into it. You can taste it, and then
Mhm.
your experiences at other places afterwards are always disappointing.
Yeah, we made a joke. We're like, we got the fifth best burger in Sauble Beach, but like, not gonna lie, it's actually probably a little higher in the list. But
100%.
but that that combination of comfort food and coastal classics, like it. I mean, it lives in a lot of different areas, certainly in the States, and I think it really does suit kind of this sort of inland lakeside
Yeah.
um, summer cuisine. But that was kind of one of the angles that House of Anansi was interested in. Our editor, Doug Richmond, he was like, I haven't seen this angle, this like comfort food, summertime comfort food angle. And so I think that's part of the reason, like, the cookbook got picked up and is going to get published.
Yeah, which is so fantastic. And I'm curious, like tapping into the writer portion of your brain, how do you go about translating something that is such a warm, nostalgic, and like heavily thought out, dining experience into a writing form? How do you get that voice into the cookbook?
Yeah, that was a really fun part. And I think the head notes. And so I did a lot of the editorial work in the cookbook outside of the recipes. And I just tried to situate myself in the experience of like, what is it like as the sun is going down and there's a warm glow over the motel, and somebody delivers you a cocktail and it's you've been swimming all day, and so it was helpful to like put an experience I've had a lot, but also to just put yourself in that space and feed off the guests that have shared that experience as well, and just kind of build that into the narrative of the cookbook. That was a really fun part, but then also the photos, like
Mm.
we worked with Lauren Miller, who's an incredible photographer. She does a lot of interiors, but has done cookbooks before, and she did our first photo shoot just for promotional stuff, and we were like, oh wow, like we could actually see these in a cookbook.
Wow.
So we thank her for sort of planting that seed, and as well as somebody who's done cookbooks, she made it feel very possible. Knowing that we were working so closely with the June Motel and we wanted creative control, we were looking for a publisher that would sort of meet that vision and let us have a lot of say. And it just so happened that a week after I reached out to Doug at Anansi, he actually already had a trip planned to come up
No way.
to Sauble Beach and to it was planning on coming into Heydays, so it worked out really, really well from a timing perspective. And everything just kind of came together. And then it helped obviously very much that there was a Netflix show coming out where Heydays was, talked about. So it was all kind of very smooth and serendipitous in a lot of ways, but really, these are massive projects. And getting the photography settled and the many, many rounds of edits. It's a very big project, but it's a lot of fun, and there's so much creative energy that goes into it, and it's a real team effort, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I always appreciate, having that behind the scenes look at how much collaboration goes in across different creative minds into creating this cookbook. And I think, you'd mentioned the Netflix show. And so I have, the visuals have after watching that of what the restaurant space looked like before you and Freddie, worked your magic with the June Motel team. So to be able to see the beautiful photography of like this really intricate dining experience after that is a really great, like, I don't want to say cathartic, but almost full circle moment to have those
Yeah.
visuals in place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, it just what Lauren comes up with and the angle she sees. And um, it's almost like you're like, you don't want it to be too pretty because you don't want people to be disappointed when they get there. But I think she just really draws out the real experience, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, there's one photo in particular that stood out, and it was the drinks, and I'm not sure which drinks it was, but it was like a
Mm,
bright blue background
yeah.
with this kind of burnt orange coloring. I don't know if you want to, if you
Yeah.
can speak to that a little bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's just an Aperol spritz. And that's kind of funny because we include recipes in the cookbook that are super simple or ones you might even know. And the idea is like, how do you build the experience that we create at Heydays at home? And so we just
Yeah.
kind of want to plant those ideas and create that feeling of our patio. Raina Schwartz was our, I think her title was technically our prop stylist, but she was very much an art director and helped oversee kind of how we plotted out the photos. Because, you have to think while you're doing this photo shoot of what, how they're going to turn up in the book. And you don't want repetitive backgrounds or, it's wild, all the stuff you have to think about. So we were in really, really good hands working with Raina and Lauren. So she's very much responsible for pulling that background, which is so cool. And the photos I love that contrast. And that was just such a fun exercise. I had I think an 8-month-old baby with us on set while we were doing that, who was very well behaved, all things considered. It was just very cool to kind of like get to play with images and something that's going to live in a book forever.
Yeah, which is really special. Like, I think to be able to have that kind of tangible hold in your hands reminder that you and your team created this is something that's really incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very excited. I can't wait to hold it in my hands.
Yeah. One of many babies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was kind of the thing. So Doug and I had been talking for a while about this project, and it actually kind of finally came together after like days after our first child arrived. It's been kind of a wild ride. Like this cookbook adventure started pretty much 2.5 years ago. My first child had just been born, and then we went through so much editing, so much photo shoots and all these other things. And now my second child is about to be born just
Yeah.
before a cookbook gets released. So it's quite a long cycle, but it's been really exciting.
I feel like it's a really unique example of showing how long a creative project can take when you can measure it in terms of babies.
Yeah, I'm a full human who can speak in the time that this has happened. Yes.
But also, I mean, full credit to you and your team. Like, I think the ability to take on all of these projects and to enter into motherhood and, create an identity for yourself that maintains everything that you've loved doing over the years that I've known you. I think it's really powerful, and I think it sets a really good example for future generations and also for people that are listening and, maybe have aspirations to kind of start somewhere and don't know what their limitations are yet.
Yeah, and I think it's like you push up ahead small pieces of this. Like it starts with an email that reach out to say like, hey, we want to do this, and then it snowballs into something much bigger. Not to glorify doing a lot of extra work while mothering. Like you and I both know that is a full-time job. But I think these kind of creative projects are really interesting because they sort of come in little spurts, and sometimes that's easier to manage, in and around motherhood and through naps and stuff like that than, certainly than a full-time job. And so yeah, it was fun to get this done and to be able to push this ahead in that time, and really fun to bring along our child for it. Like we got, he was there. He had like,
Yeah.
he was tasting all the extra food that was made for the photo shoots and stuff. And so that's been a really incredible experience.
Yeah, that's a really special layer to it. Like I think it just adds another level of nuance to the idea of, the good old days being the days that
Yeah.
you're experiencing right now too. In terms of the writing process, this creative process, and reflecting through the years on what you've been able to do, have you found that writing the cookbook illuminated any sort of reflections about this time period for you that were surprising or interesting?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it really is a walk down memory lane when you're like going back and talking about like, how did this start and how would I explain this to people? Uh, I think it ends up being a very piecemeal process because like, oh, we need something here, we need to throw in something here. So it's very collaborative with both the publishing house and then as well like our internal team. Hey, we need, we want to talk about this, or we want to play up this piece a little bit more. So I think it's very interesting. But what I kind of kept coming back to was that theme of, um, we're creating this space for people's memories and really focusing on that, like that came through as I was like, what is it? Why do we do this? And what's special about this place? And it's that we get to share such incredible experiences with our guests. And they in turn get to do that with their families and friends. And I think we have some of the most loyal regulars I've ever seen in any business we've ever done. And we're up to like 7 now.
Wow.
Like people keep coming back. It's a space that they adore, and they'll get the same things every time. Um, and I love that. Like we have a friendship and a relationship with these folks, and it's just been a really, really incredible experience. And yeah, and just like I think that celebration, that's really the theme of the food is at the end of the day, what do you want to celebrate? And what are you celebrating? Is it just, being alive in Sauble Beach at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, a sunset, it feels like in a space like that, it was designed to have that vibe, and that's really cool. And I'm conscious that like this is with a lot of celebration food like oysters, and we even have a caviar service recipe in the cookbook. Like
Yeah.
it's a little bit ironic at a time when, there are grocery cost crisis happening and so many other things. But I think, we plugging into that moment or channeling that moment when just having the opportunity to be with friends and family and to even eat in the restaurant felt novel and special. And that is sort of the concept of the good old days coming to life.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that's one of those things where that idea of celebration, particularly the last 4 years, I think sometimes we lose sight of it too, right? It's the day to day grind is a lot, and even if it is just celebrating that you're alive at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, able to have some fries that might sound like a really simple plate, but there's so much flavor and there's a story behind where they came and how you created that recipe. I think that matters too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a balance, and I think we love being able to offer that experience, and what's more importantly, like we love being able to now facilitate people taking it home, and like how do I don't have to cook everything in here, but it's how do I bring some of that celebration and ceremony to moments that I do in my own home, and that we hope is something people can enjoy.
Yeah, I can't wait for it to come out. And Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show to chat more about the background of it. Because I could talk to you forever about anything, but it's exciting to talk about your cookbook.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Do you mind sharing where people can find you and the Heydays cookbook online if they want to follow along and learn more about the restaurant and the recipes in the cookbook?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on Instagram, Heydays Restaurant, sorry, at Heydays Restaurant. The cookbook will be available all over Canada. I highly encourage checking out independent booksellers to
Yes.
buy or pre-order, like Flying Books in Toronto. But we will be available on Indigo and Amazon as well. Um, and what else? Website, heydays.thejunemotel.com to check out our menu this season and to, buy gift certificates or cookbooks or anything else, I think. Yeah, I think that's all of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
That was Katie Laliberté. I've linked Heydays at the June Motel Beachtown Classic Cookbook, Heydays website and social media in the show notes below. You can also find all of this at my website at anthodish.com under episodes. For more Anthodish, you can find me at sarahdignan.substack.com or on TikTok, Threads, Instagram, or Facebook as Anthodish Podcast. Feel free to drop me a line and let me know what you think about the episode. I always welcome conversation and reflections on what you've been learning from the show. Sound editing and production was done by Lucas Wojcicki at lucassound.com. Check out his website if you're in need of audio production or music composition for your podcasts. Anthodish is produced in partnership with the American Anthropological Association. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.